Years ago, I watched my mother lose her job after developing carpal tunnel from years of repetitive data entry work. She took time off to recover, had surgery, and when she was returned, she was later let go. That moment really stayed with me. It showed me how fragile work can be when businesses depend on manual processes and how much opportunity there is when we use technology to support people instead of burn them out. That belief is a big part of why I'm so excited to present today's guest. Harrison Ryder is a sales strategist who specializes in how SaaS companies can use AI to sell smarter, scale faster, and close deals with better fit clients. He's known for helping teams streamline their sales operations, build intelligent outreach systems, and use data to make better decisions at every stage of the funnel. Harrison understands not only how AI changes sales, but how to implement it in ways that actually move revenue. He's worked with companies in the insurance, fintech, and legal space. Today, we'll dig into how fintech companies can use AI to stay ahead, build stronger pipelines, and turn unpredictable sales into something that's scalable and repeatable. In an industry like fintech, where compliance, data accuracy, and long sales cycles can slow companies down, AI isn't just a nice to have, it's a competitive advantage. Harrison, how did you first get involved in sales consulting, and what led you to start focusing on AI-driven sales strategies?
Sure. Well, I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial bent about me. But it was really the last VP of sales role that I had with a company. This was a company out of Cork, Ireland, and they offered a SaaS or enterprise application that really touched regulatory and compliance space. And what I noticed there is that they were really focused on always trying to shorten the sales cycle, which most companies do. And there's obviously nothing wrong with that. But the big push was to take, let's say, a deal that was going to close in the fourth quarter and try to move that up to the first quarter. But what they would do in order to make that happen is they would leave revenue on the table. They would also make sales before the buyer was actually ready to buy. And oftentimes that really complemented or complicated the implementation process. And then ultimately what happened was that all of the sales reps were focused on moving deals forward and never focused on building a strong sales pipeline. And so as I started working with small to medium-sized companies, I realized that oftentimes the bottlenecks occur throughout organizations. And those are bottlenecks like, trying to research, trying to build lists. And salespeople are spending a lot of time logging and creating lists as opposed to selling. And so that's really what made me embrace AI as I saw the tools really advance and quite frankly, offer that competitive advantage, really be more system focused as opposed to trying to sell harder or more of a sales effort. So I work with organizations now and I help them to sell smarter, not necessarily harder, if you will.
Yeah, I understand the need to create a strong sales pipeline. You want to make sure the leads are steadily coming in and people are buying when they're ready. Here at Connex, we have people that want to buy our software, but they don't have QuickBooks set up or their website isn't quite set up right, and it's not a good time to do the install. They can't see the value. We find that when companies have the shipping software set up and they're running it, the faster someone sees value, the more likely they are to buy. You want to make sure they're in the right place technologically to get it done. And many SaaS teams today, including Connex, have lists of companies, but not the decision makers. What AI tools or workflows do you recommend for identifying accurate contacts?
Well, there are a variety of tools out there. What I truly recommend is that, you start with a data source, whether it's Apollo, whether it's Zoom Info, whether it's Clay. And the thought there is that you utilize the AI tools to really segment those lists and maybe start to sort in terms of company size, maybe start to sort on tech stacks, start to sort in terms of job titles that are really influenced or impacted by the value proposition that you bring, and then validate that with the ability to scrape LinkedIn, for example, and then consolidate utilizing AI in terms of title validation. So then you've got a situation where AI does a great job, I should say, answering the question of who has this problem, who's responsible for this problem at a company like this, as opposed to trying to develop those titles manually. So AI can be very helpful in terms of identifying who are the appropriate contacts and ultimately who would be those decision makers.
Here at Connex, we work with the salespeople at SaaS companies, for example, ShipStation. And their challenge is that people want to buy ShipStation, but they need an integration, or they're trying to integrate their tech stack, but the ShipStation's unable to do it. And we work with the sales team to help close sales. And our goal here at Connex, in terms of like, we've looked into using Zoom Info and using Apollo, will be to get a list of the decision makers, like who's in charge of revenue at this company. Because leads are precious, and the last thing you want to do is throw out a lead because of some sort of minor problem that a third party could complete.
Sure.
You want to make sure you don't have a leaky bucket. Like, actually, this is not a closed loss. This could be a closed one if we get another party involved. What are some of the quickest AI wins a sales team can implement to build reliable contact lists without spending days researching manually?
Yeah, my thought is that in order to get those wins, I would develop those lists, again, using AI-powered list enhancement tools. And the idea is that you can upload company information and then utilize tools to actually pull in who those decision makers are. The other option is to really cluster titles. And what I mean by that is that AI can look at who is the head of financial operations, who is a controller, and actually develop a persona that encompasses both of those titles. So you're not necessarily just chasing titles, but you're actually developing kind of a persona that would encompass both of those titles. The other piece is to use AI for scoring the emails so you can identify who are the risky emails before you actually send those out. You know, the thought there is that in terms of a productivity enhancement, that you can cut the time, I would say, anywhere from 60 to 70% utilizing AI tools as opposed to doing the research yourself.
Yeah, I had a sales team last year, and it's very difficult. We had a list of 1,000 Amazon sellers, and we sent out emails. It wasn't targeted enough, and we actually found out that many of the Amazon sellers are not our target customer.
Okay.
In fact, so I think with lists, making sure that you have a targeted group of users, like, do these people really need my help? One of the challenges we've had even here at Connex is whenever we've gone in cold, we get almost no response. We actually had a LinkedIn campaign and we sent them out to various salespeople at tech companies, and we got a 65% open rate. Not a single person responded. Can AI help me get a response from some of these users, or help me get the right person at these companies?
Yeah, it definitely can. So AI could scan company lists. They could company websites. They could scan LinkedIn profiles. They could also scan job postings to help develop or to help get an idea of who contacts could be. And you could include, various items that you search on. And then the thought is that you could use that information to create very succinct emails. So the strategy in terms of reaching out is that you don't want to necessarily create longer emails, but you want to create more relevant emails in terms of people that are going to respond to it. So really targeted threads, again, on those buyer personas that you develop.
Let's say I have 1,000 Connex customers. Couldn't I create a lookalike audience on a Facebook or a LinkedIn and somehow reach out to them? How is AI different than using like a lookalike audience?
Yeah, AI is going to be more targeted, and you can really tailor it in terms of what inputs that you're asking, and you're driving the results that you want, as opposed to just kind of that blanket list that you have.
And how do you, as you know, I'm sure cold outreach has changed dramatically in the last several years. How can AI help us write smarter, more personalized emails that get responses?
Again, it really gets to the part where you're focusing on more relevance as opposed to just doing email blasts and doing them more frequently. You're really targeting that outreach, and you're focusing more on again, writing emails that, and having AI help you do that, but writing emails that are relevant to the target audience that you're reaching. So those buyer personas that you're developing with the help of AI.
I mean, even here at Connex, a lot of many of my customers are in retail. Some of my best customers, one's a toy store, another one sells video games, and Christmas time is definitely not the time to call them. That's
Sure.
when they get probably the best time. Would AI help me to tick like when is a good time to call them? Maybe January or February when things kind of slow down?
It would. It can help a lot. So, for example, with a buyer persona that you develop, you can actually predict, AI can help you predict what is the best time to send those emails out. And obviously, you can adjust the messaging for the audience that you want to reach. Ultimately, AI has the ability to auto pause the sequences based on buyer engagement or buyer activity signs that it's important to do. So again, you're not just sending more emails and sending the same messaging out, but AI is really helping you tailor the messaging, but also the frequency and that sequencing that is so important in those email campaigns.
And one challenge you're facing when you know who the true buyer is, accounting, operations, or even e-commerce managers, how can AI help map the buying committees more accurately?
Well, actually, AI is very good at doing that. Part of that is that, what you're doing is you're, again, identifying who are those personas that you want to go after. And you're making sure that you're identifying kind of the common threads of, let me step back. AI is very good at utilizing data that you've already captured, whether it be in a CRM system, and it can analyze that information. It can also look at the activities or identify the common patterns in some of the buyers' personas that you have developed. So, for example, it can look at roles like the financial decision maker. It could look at who's the champion, who tends to be the champion, and who tends to be the blockers within that. And that you can then cross-reference that with, let's say, LinkedIn to, again, further identify who that's going to be. And so then the idea is that you're sending out multi-thread outreach as opposed to, again, just that blanket outreach approach.
Yeah, we found here at Connex, we've tried cold emails. Last year, we purchased a cold email service, and they sent out these emails, and some people, unless we're like doctors and lawyers who are nowhere near our ICP, I don't think we've had a lot of success here at Connex doing any sort of cold emailing. How do you think AI would help us have more success? I think one of the biggest challenges is we just had a bad list.
Yeah, potentially that could be the case. Again, the idea is that, and I've experienced the same thing in my own practice, where utilizing services that can actually reach out. And what I found, quite frankly, is that I felt like I was doing my brand more of a disservice than a service because of some of the responses that I was getting. And so that, again, the idea is that you utilize AI to, again, identify things that are like in LinkedIn, company sites, things are job postings that might be listed, to, again, identify who are those warmer contacts. The other piece is that there's an AI tool called KnowledgeNet AI, and it's very good at building relationships. So based on your LinkedIn profiles, based on your LinkedIn contacts, you can start to identify if you have a decision maker that you think you want to go after. You can utilize that tool to make a determination is what is the connection that you have towards that decision maker, and then reach out to a contact and say, how well do you know this decision maker, and would you be willing to make an introduction for me? So again, you soften that cold outreach by having a warmer approach to reaching those individuals.
I see. Let's say I wanted to meet a salesperson at a warehouse management company. Let's say Skewval Linworks, for instance. Could AI help us look at our LinkedIn contacts and say, Harrison Ryder actually knows the director of sales at this warehouse management company. Can you make an introduction? And gets me a call. Even Ship Hero, for example, we tried 2024 to get a hold of them, never did. They hired a director of business development who we knew, and he introduced us to the sales team, and now they help us with a couple of referrals. And so it sounds like that I think it would be a better approach to go through our existing connections and figure out who knows
Very much so.
the salesperson at this company. Maybe that's a better way to use AI.
And what that AI tool will do is it will map various connections to that contact, but it's going to spell who is the strongest connection that you have. And then again, it's, reaching out to that contact and saying, hey, I'm interested in speaking to this person. I think I've got a service or an application that they would be interested in. Would you be kind enough to make an introduction? And what I find is that most people are willing to do that.
And it sounds like this technology you're mentioning could potentially replace a sales development rep. If you received a list of companies, can AI look up the emails, create an email template, and reach out to them? You think or is that something that's best for HubSpot?
What that tool is going to do is, yes, that tool could help you write emails, but what that tool can do is also integrate with your CRM system. So I personally recommend that you write the emails out of your CRM system. That way, all of the information is contained in there. And I just think it's more accurate. You've got one central data location where somebody's going for the information.
And could AI use a tool like Apollo or ZoomInfo to prospect and find leads? Because one of the challenges we've had is you get a large list of emails and it's difficult to go through them one by one. And if so, could you think HubSpot should email them on our behalf, or how does AI get involved when you put in a database?
Sure. What AI can do is it can query a database like Apollo, and it can do that to match your ICP or your ideal customer profile. What it can also do is it can enrich and verify the email addresses, and then ultimately it's going to personalize that outreach. What you want to do is that you could use other tools, and in fact, as you mentioned, HubSpot, to do the actual outreaches. The only concern is that if that is fully automated, you want to make sure that you've got the appropriate guardrails in place, that you want to make sure that you've got a human reviewing the emails. There's that kind of messaging QA that is so important, that you want to understand the emails that are being sent out. You don't want to fully hand that over.
AI can make mistakes when sending some of those emails. Could you walk us through an example where AI transformed a company's sales pipeline or dramatically increased conversions?
Sure. I think of a fintech client that I had that really focused on the payment infrastructure. And what we did is that we replaced kind of that manual list development with AI. What we also did is we personalized the outreach to individuals. And we did that based on the payment volume that we anticipated, or that we were able to sort and filter the data by. The other piece that we did is that we did a multi-outreach utilizing AI to the finance people, but then also the operations people. And what we saw was roughly about a 2.5 times response rate, increase in the response rate. We also saw a 40% more meetings booked. And then what we found is that we were able to shorten the sales the sales cycle, because we were really targeting the buyers, as opposed to, again, just doing the broad outreach. And that was very effective. What also was telling in that example is that with the same headcount, we were able to achieve those results because, quite frankly, we had a better system in place.
With regards to cold emails, we tried using HubSpot for cold emails, and they asked us, is this a cold list? How does AI get around the whole cold email list in HubSpot? Because they want to make sure that we gather the emails legitimately.
Yeah, I think at that point, the administrator in HubSpot is going to make a determination and have to indicate whether it's a cold list or whether it's not a cold list. Quite frankly, there isn't a way around that.
But I mean, if you're getting warm introductions through LinkedIn, it's not a cold list.
Not at all. Not at all.
And as we plan ahead for 2026, what AI trends in sales prospecting should SaaS and Fintech companies be preparing for right now?
I think you could truly have kind of the autonomous prospecting systems, so utilizing AI to do that. I think you can also utilize AI co-pilots in the various CRM systems, because they have the ability to real-time suggest kind of the next steps. Also, is if you look at an application like HubSpot as your various deal stages, what they can do is actually score or rank the deal. And that's based on all of the information that's gathered within HubSpot. And that's extremely useful because what it can do is spot that maybe close dates have been pushed out. Maybe you don't have the right contact. All of those kind of things can indicate how valid is this particular prospect and how likely is it to close.
And for founders or sales teams who feel overwhelmed and don't know where to start with AI prospecting, what's the very first step that you recommend?
First of all, I'd recommend that you start slow. And I would say that momentum is better than perfection, quite frankly. And so I would look at a particular task that happens to be very painful for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I would look to use AI to assist with that. It could be something like automating contact outreach, quite frankly, and start slow and use AI to do that. And what I would do is start to measure the results that you're achieving. And again, I would focus on establishing momentum as opposed to perfection.
And the last question that I had for today, let's say a company doesn't have Zoom Info or Apollo, or even Sales Navigator. Can you still use AI for the prospecting, or do you need to buy some sort of expensive list service?
What I would say, though, is that it's important are companies that have a strong sales infrastructure in place. And what I mean by that is that it's important that you understand, what is your go-to market strategy? So, what is your competitive position? Who is your ideal customer profile? What is your unique value proposition in a market? Because that allows you to be able to use those AI tools. The other piece is kind of looking at a sales methodology in terms of, do you understand your sales process and have you mapped that out? And the reason that that's so key is that if you haven't identified that and quite frankly documented that, it's hard to identify where the AI tools are going to add the greatest value. One of the other pieces that I really work with my clients on developing is not only that sales process, but what are your ideal clients' buying process and how do we incorporate that into that sales process? So again, it's not all about us, but it's about working with our ideal customers and how they buy and how we can effectively sell to them.
What is their decision-making process? Like, all right, we're going to look at 3 vendors and choose the one with the lowest price, or we're going to look at 3 vendors, but we really only want the second one. How do they decide who is a decision maker, who has influence on the decision?
Very much so. Kind of a conversation that I had with a sales rep at one point where, he was confident that this deal was going to close in a certain amount of time, in fact, a month. And I said to him, well, where is the deal right now? Well, it's in procurement. And I said, well, do you have a contact in procurement? Do you know how long deals tend to sit in procurement before they actually are released and move forward? Well, not knowing that type of information really impacts whether you can call out a deal and say that, well, in the next month it's going to close. So that's why it's so critical to make sure, again, you've got that strong sales infrastructure in place.
And Harrison, I want to give you a huge thanks for joining us today. If you run a SaaS or a fintech company and you want to build smarter sales systems, streamline your pipeline, or close more deals with precision, reach out to Harrison on LinkedIn or go to salesacceleration.com. If you're ready to automate your accounting and operations so you can focus on growth, visit connexecommerce.com. That's exactly what we built Connex to do. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone building or scaling a SaaS business going into 2026. Thank you.
Thank you.